There's a strange advantage that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid: being underestimated. Most people want others to immediately recognize their intelligence, their strength, their ambition, their potential. They want to walk into a room and be respected. They want their enemies to know they are dangerous. They want their friends to know they are capable. They want everyone to understand exactly who they are. But what if proving yourself too early is one of the fastest ways to weaken your position? What if the person who doubts you is sometimes giving you an advantage without realizing it? Because when someone believes you are less capable than you really are, something changes. They stop hiding. They become careless. They reveal what they would have concealed from someone they considered dangerous. And while they are busy feeling superior, you are learning everything. That is where this begins, not with pretending to be weak, but with understanding the enormous difference between possessing strength and displaying it. Machiavelli lived in a political world where obvious ambition could be dangerous. Renaissance courts were filled with rivals, alliances, spies, wealthy families, and men who smiled at one another while quietly calculating who would survive the next shift in power. In an environment like that, announcing your intentions was rarely wise. If people knew exactly what you wanted, they could block you. If they knew exactly what you feared, they could pressure you. And if they knew exactly how capable you were, they could begin preparing for you before you ever made a move. Visibility has a price. The more clearly people understand your strength, the more carefully they behave around you. Imagine two players sitting across from each other at a chessboard. One immediately demonstrates his skill. His opponent becomes cautious. Every move is examined. Every possibility is considered. Every weakness is protected. But suppose the second player appears ordinary, perhaps even inexperienced. His opponent relaxes. He begins taking unnecessary risks. He attacks too quickly. He stops asking what might be hidden behind an apparently simple move. Nothing about the board changed. What changed was perception, and perception changes behavior. This principle exists everywhere. At work, a colleague who assumes you are harmless may speak openly around you. They may reveal frustrations, ambitions, and alliances they would never discuss around someone they considered a rival. A competitor who believes your business is insignificant may ignore you while you quietly improve. A person who assumes you need their approval may become careless with how they treat you. Someone who thinks they understand you may stop observing you carefully. That adds the hidden gift inside being underestimated. People lower their defenses, and lower defenses reveal reality. There is something important here, however. Being underestimated is useful only when you do not become psychologically dependent on correcting it. This is where most people fail. Someone doubts their intelligence, and immediately they need to prove they are intelligent. Suddenly they begin listing achievements. Someone treats them as inexperienced, and they rush to demonstrate knowledge. Someone challenges their status and they become louder. The other person has barely done anything, yet within seconds they are controlling the conversation. Why? Because they discovered the ego's favorite button, the need to be recognized. This need is expensive. When you desperately need people to know what you are capable of, they can provoke you into revealing information before it is useful. They can make you show insecurity. They can make you compete in situations that offer you nothing. Sometimes the strongest response to being underestimated is simply allowing the misunderstanding to survive. Not forever, just long enough for reality to become more useful than explanation. Think about how strange this feels. Someone thinks you are weak, and you know they are wrong. Every instinct tells you to correct them. But why? What exactly do you gain? Their approval? A moment of superiority? The temporary satisfaction of changing their opinion? Now I ask a different question. What do you gain if they continue believing it? Perhaps freedom, perhaps information, perhaps time, perhaps the opportunity to develop without interference. There is a reason. There is a reason unfinished plans often grow better in sight. The moment you announce something, it enters other people's minds. And people rarely receive your ambition neutrally. Some will encourage you. Some will doubt you. Some will compare themselves to you. Some will quietly hope you fail. Some may even imitate you before you have completed what you started. Suddenly, something that once existed between you and your work becomes a public performance. Now you are not only building, you are proving. And proving consumes energy. The person who works quietly has a different advantage. There is nothing to defend. Nothing to maintain. Nothing to maintain. This is why appearing ordinary can sometimes protect extraordinary development. A seed does not announce itself while it is underground. There is no applause, no argument, no audience. It develops strength before anyone can judge the result. Human ambition often benefits from the same privacy. But being underestimated does more than protect plans. It reveals character. Watch what happens when people believe you cannot help them. When they think you have no status, when they believe you possess nothing they need, their behavior becomes educational. Some people are respectful only when they sense power. Others are kind only when they expect something in return. Some dismiss people they consider unimportant and become charming the moment status enters the room. If you always advertise your value, you may never discover this. People perform around visible power, but they reveal themselves around people they believe do not matter. This is one reason powerful observers sometimes say less than expected. They are not merely being mysterious. They are allowing the room to expose itself. Who interrupts? Who listens? Who needs attention? Who flatters authority? Who humiliates weaker people? Who changes personality depending on who enters? These details are easy to miss when you are busy trying to dominate the room. Observation requires a certain willingness to disappear, not physically, psychologically, to stop demanding that every moment confirms your importance. This is difficult because modern culture constantly encourages display. Show the achievement. Show the purchase. Show the relationship. Show the transformation. Show the plan. Show everyone that you are winning. But constant display creates constant exposure. Once people know what you value, they know what affects you. Once they know what you are pursuing, they can predict your direction. Once they know what impresses you, they know how to gain access. And once they understand how desperately you want to appear successful, they know how to manipulate your ego. There is freedom in not needing to look powerful, because the person obsessed with appearing strong can be controlled through appearances. Insult them publicly, and they must respond. Ignore them, and they must become louder. Doubt them, and they must prove something. Challenge them, and they must accept. They are not choosing their actions anymore. Their image is choosing for them. Real strength behaves differently. It can tolerate temporary misunderstanding. It can survive being ignored. It does not need every person in the room to recognize it immediately, because it knows something insecurity does not. Results eventually speak in a language explanation cannot imitate. This does not mean making yourself smaller. Do not confuse strategic restraint with self-erasure. There are moments when your competence should be visible. A negotiation may require credibility. A leadership position may require confidence. A boundary may need to be unmistakable. If you continually pretend to know less than you do, people may genuinely stop trusting your ability. The goal is not to perform weakness. The goal is to stop displaying strength unnecessarily. There is a difference. The insecure person says, "Please understand how capable I am." The arrogant person says, "You need to know how capable I am." The strategic person asks, "Does it benefit me for you to know?" That question changes everything. Sometimes the answer is, sometimes your reputation protects you. Sometimes displaying competence prevents conflict. Sometimes people need evidence before they trust you with responsibility. But sometimes the answer is number. And when it is no, silence becomes an asset. Consider a workplace where a colleague constantly takes credit. Your first instinct may be to confront them emotionally. Perhaps that is necessary, but perhaps there is another move. Document your work. Keep records. Build relationships with the people who actually evaluate results. Let the pattern become visible without announcing every frustration. The colleague may continue believing you are passive. They become careless. They repeat the behavior. Now the problem is no longer your accusation. It is documented reality. Or imagine someone in your social circle constantly makes subtle jokes at your expense. They assume your calmness means weakness. You could explode. You could give them exactly the emotional reaction they were testing for. Or you could observe. Notice when they do it. Notice who they do it around. Notice why they need the reaction. Then, when a boundary is necessary, make it clean, not dramatic, not desperate, simply unmistakable. The most unsettling thing for someone who underestimated you is not anger. It is discovering that your silence was not helplessness. It was choice. And that distinction becomes even more powerful when competition is involved. A rival who thinks you are ahead becomes defensive. A rival who thinks you are behind may become complacent. They begin celebrating early. They stop improving. They expose their strategy. They spend energy watching people they consider more dangerous. Meanwhile, you continue building. This is why comparison can become such a trap. People want to know where they rank. Who is ahead? Who earns more? Who has more influence? Who is winning? But the person who constantly announces their position gives everyone else useful information. Sometimes you are better served by allowing the scoreboard to remain unclear. Work, learn, accumulate skill, build relationships, strengthen your position, and allow the visible result to arrive after the invisible preparation. There is another psychological advantage to this. When you stop trying to prove yourself, you become far better at learning, because proving and learning are often enemies. The person trying to prove intelligence avoids questions that might make them look ignorant. The person trying to learn asks them. The person trying to prove strength avoids admitting weakness. The person trying to improve studies it. The person trying to appear successful hides mistakes. The person actually becoming successful analyzes them. Being comfortable with temporary underestimation gives you permission to remain a student. That is incredibly powerful. You no longer need to know everything. You no longer need to win every argument. You no longer need to have the fastest answer. You can listen. And listening is dangerous in a world where everyone else is waiting for their turn to speak. People tell you who they are. They tell you what they want. They tell you what frightens them. They tell you where they feel superior. They even tell you how they intend to deal with you, usually not because you interrogated them, but because they assumed you were not important enough to hide from. Remember this. People protect themselves from what they respect as a threat. They expose themselves around what they dismiss. So if someone underestimates you, do not always rush to rescue their perception. Study what their confidence reveals. Let them speak. Let them assume. Let them become comfortable. Then continue becoming more capable than the version of you they constructed in their head, because eventually there comes a moment when perception collides with reality. The work appears. The boundary holds. The decision succeeds. The result becomes undeniable. And suddenly the person who thought they understood you realizes something deeply uncomfortable. They were not watching closely enough. But there is one final warning. Do not turn this into revenge. If your entire motivation becomes proving doubters wrong, the doubters still control you. They simply control you from a greater distance. You are still building your life around their opinion. The highest form of being underestimated is not secretly thinking, "One day I will show them." It is reaching the point where showing them is no longer necessary. You know what you are developing. You know what you are capable of. Their doubt does not reduce you. That is when underestimation becomes genuine freedom. Not because other people think less of you, but because you no longer need to manage every thought they have about you. So let some people misunderstand. Let some people assume you are ordinary. Let them mistake patience for hesitation. Let them mistake silence for ignorance. Let them mistake restraint for weakness. You do not need to correct every conclusion. You only need to understand when the truth must become visible. Until then, observe, prepare, improve, and remember, the person who thinks they have already figured you out is often the person who has stopped looking. And sometimes, that is exactly where your advantage begins.